Thank you, AP. Thank you very much. And good evening, everyone. So my name is Jiang Wu. I'm a director of the Center for Buddhist Studies and also professor of East Asian Studies. And today is a very special day, and it's our honor to have Dr. Andrew Weil with us to talk about humanities and integrated medicine. AP just mentioned that we have a new building over there. So if you haven't been there, so please visit the new building. And it is truly a magnificent and edge-cutting because it embodies the integration of the body, mind, and the spirit. And also we have a new unit, right? So the Health Humanities Hub, also located on the third floor, right? Please don't miss the opportunity. And also congratulations to our Durant Sting, AP Durant, and Dr. Andrew Weil for the great accomplishment. And for the past couple of years, I have the privilege of working with this building project and witnessing its conception, construction, and building. And also in the spring, I traveled with Dr. Andrew Weil to Taiwan. So we attend a Buddhist University forum organized by Fo Guangshan Buddhist Order. And also we visited the tea plantations to inspect the Taiwan tea. And we plan to go back again, right? Because it's a lovely place and can foster many, many more collaborations. Right? And people said, we don't need introduction for Dr. Andrew Weil because he is so famous. But I still want to read his biography as a way of celebrating his life and career. And Dr. Andrew Weil was born in Philadelphia in 1942, received an AB degree in biology from Harvard in 1964, and an MD from Harvard Medical School in 1968. After completing a medical internship at the Mount Zion Hospital in San Francisco, he worked a year with the National Institute of Mental Health, then wrote his first book, The Natural Mind. From 1971 to 75, as a fellow of the Institute of Current World Affairs, Dr. Weil traveled widely in North and South America and Africa, collecting information on drug use in other cultures, medicinal plants, and alternative methods of treating disease. From 1971 to 84, he was on the research staff of the Harvard Botanical Museum and conducted investigations of medicinal and psychoactive plants. Dr. Weil is the founder and director of the Andrew Weil Center for Integrated Medicine at the University of Arizona, where he also hosts the Lowell Jones Endowed Chair in Integrated Medicine and is clinical professor of medicine and a professor of public health. The center is a leading effort in the world to develop a comprehensive curriculum in integrated medicine. Graduates serve as directors of integrated medicines programs throughout the United States. Through its fellowship and integrated medicine in residency curricula, the center is now training doctors, physician assistants, nurse practitioners around the world. Dr. Weil is a world-renowned author, having written many scientific and popular articles and books, some of which are available here for signing tonight. Without further ado, please join me in welcome Dr. Andrew Weil.
Thank you. Thank you. Both Dean Duran and Dr. Wu, it's a pleasure to be here. Welcome all of you. I have to say that until I met AP Durand, I was unaware of the fact that health and well-being were part of the subjects taught in colleges of humanities. But I believe that the College of Humanities here at the University of Arizona is unique in creating now a health and humanities hub and having such a robust collaboration with a unit of the College of Medicine. So I could not be more pleased that there is a physical presence of that hub in our new building, and really look forward to many collaborations. But it totally makes sense, since health and well-being are certainly essential parts of the human experience, and the humanities broadly has to do with everything that is human. I don't know how familiar all of you are with the basic principles of integrative medicine, but let me just summarize them for you very briefly. And also let me say that I am absolutely convinced that this is the future of medicine and the future of healthcare, and that one day we'll be able to drop the word integrative and it'll just be good medicine. But these are the basic principles that we follow. First, we honor the intrinsic healing potential of the human organism. That is hardly a new idea. Hippocrates in the 5th century BC taught us to revere the healing power of nature. But in my experience, that is completely ignored in the way that medicine is taught today. I don't think I ever heard the word healing used in my medical education, except in my first year histology course in the phrase wound healing. If I were in charge of medical education, I would have an entire first year devoted to understanding the healing mechanisms of the organism. You know, to me, this is the most wonderful aspect of our biology, is that our bodies are capable of recognizing when they have been damaged, injured, and they have many mechanisms available for repair. I also find it ironic that it's easier to talk about that with kids than it is with my medical colleagues. You know, if a kid gets an owie, you say, watch what happens over the next few days, and it's very easy to plant the seed that the body has the ability to repair itself and heal. But that idea is largely missing from the way that most conventional physicians think and practice. The second very important aspect of integrative medicine, and the one I'm going to concentrate on tonight, is that human beings are more than physical bodies. You know, this is whole person medicine. We are mental, emotional beings. We're spiritual entities. We're community members. Those other dimensions of human life have to be taken into account in order to understand health and illness. Conventional medicine's narrow focus on the physical is, I think, its greatest limitation. And that follows from the materialistic philosophy that dominates Western science and medicine. You know, to materialists, all that is real is that which can be seen, touched, measured, and I suppose in the case of medicine, removed. But you know, we do not, the materialistic scientists really do not believe in the mind, and they certainly do not believe that the mind can cause changes in the physical body. One of the basic tenets of materialism is that if you observe a change in a physical system, the cause has to be physical. You know, non-physical causation of physical events is not allowed for in that way of thinking. And I think that is the single greatest limitation of conventional medicine and Western science in general, that our completely single-minded focus on the physical body and the fact that all of our treatments are directed to that really enormously limits our effectiveness in managing many conditions of disease. When I went to Taiwan last year with Dr. Wu, I heard about a healer in Taipei who sounded so interesting that I really wanted to meet her, and shortly afterwards I had a Zoom conversation with her. And then we invited her to give a presentation at our center, and this was a few weeks ago. Her anglicized name is Julia Shu, spelled H-S-U. She's an MD, Harvard-trained MD, and lives in Taipei. She calls herself an intuitive healer and an energy healer. She works with a neurologist, also Harvard-trained, who's her partner and aids her in her work. She sees about 6 patients a day for an average of 20 minutes each, one time only, and is able to produce the most remarkable cures of chronic conditions. I had a chance to review a lot of her cases, to see videos of her patients. I've never seen anything like this. She says that 90% of illness originates in the mind. And this is, I'd say, the Asian conception of mind, which includes what we call heart. So it's not only thoughts and thinking, it's emotions and probably spiritual aspects of that as well. And although I'm unclear how she came by this ability, she says that when she's with a patient, she's able to see or perceive the non-physical roots of their illness, which often are in past family stress. And by bringing these to the surface and then giving some sort of energy to patients, she produces these remarkable cures. So for example, she showed us videos of Parkinson's patients. She says that most cases of Parkinson's disease, most patients with Parkinson's disease have control issues. And she had one video of a woman, an elderly woman, whose tremor was so bad that she couldn't eat with chopsticks anymore. And after 20 minutes with Dr. Shu, she was able to hold chopsticks perfectly. And she had cases of this kind with very severe dermatologic conditions, some cases of cancer, including a case of lung cancer that regressed completely after what she did. But this is she's very articulate. She's, as I said, a Harvard-trained MD, and she maintains that 90% of illness originates in the non-physical sphere. And she is somehow able to manipulate this and is able to teach other people to do it. She's written 2 books, which Dr. Wu and I are trying to have translated and published here. She says she can teach other people what she does. Now, in my own personal experience, I have again and again seen physical disease changed by changes in the non-physical sphere. And I'll just tell you one personal experience that I had. This was, I don't know, it was a while ago. But I spent the summer in the Pacific Northwest, and I was driving back with my then wife to Tucson and stopped at a friend's house outside of Olympia, Washington, who had a hot tub. I'm usually pretty careful about hot tubs that I get into, and this one looked a little sketchy to me. But nonetheless, I soaked in it. And about 24 hours later, I got a skin eruption, which started on my upper arm. Then I got, they seemed like pustules, and I got one on my chest. Then one appeared on my face. They were painful, and I knew what this was. This is a bacterial infection called hot tub folliculitis, and it's usually caused by a pretty nasty organism, Pseudomonas, which is rather resistant to treatment. And by the time I got back to Tucson, I was really feeling unwell, and I had several of these on my face, which really bothered me. And I was attempted to deal with it by taking vitamin C. I was trying to soak it with hot compresses, and I wanted to get it out. I was squeezing them, but nothing came out. There was no pus. And my wife, we had a mutual friend who had just graduated from interactive guided imagery training. She was a physician and also in the Northwest. And my wife said, why don't you call her and have her do a session with you on the phone? And I said, what is guided imagery possibly going to do for a Pseudomonas infection? And she leaned on me, so I called this friend of mine who said, yes, she would work with me over the phone. So I remember cradling the receivers with days of receivers. I remember cradling the receiver in my shoulder and sitting on a couch. And this woman said to me, she got me into a relaxed state and sort of a light trance state. And she said, pick the lesion that is causing you the most difficulty. It was one right here, which was large and painful. And she said, what do you see there if you go into that? And what I saw was a kind of mass of swirling, angry red energy that couldn't get out. And she said, and what is it saying to you? So I remember listening, and what I got was that it was saying to me that it couldn't leave my body by going out, and that it had to be absorbed inward and discharged. So I listened to this, and she said, well, if that's the case, what should you be doing? And I said, well, I should stop squeezing these things, and I should probably, rest and maybe put more heat on it, but then just tell it that, I would let it circulate and discharge. When I got off the phone, my wife said she could see a change in the way these things looked, that they looked less angry and red. The next morning, they were gone. Without any kind of antibiotic treatment or other intervention. And that's pretty dramatic, especially since I didn't particularly believe it with my conscious mind. I could tell you story after story like this. I worked for a number of years with a very skilled hypnotherapist here in Tucson, Dr. Steve Gergovich, and we saw many patients together. When we had a clinic in the medical center in the early days of our program, we had a patient, an elderly man, I think he was about 80, who had failed 7 corneal transplants. His body had rejected them all. And the eye doctors told him that they would only try one more time, and that was the limit of what they could do. And he was very desperate. So we came in and we did several hypnosis sessions with him, giving him suggestions that his body would accept the corneal transplant. It did. It went perfectly. And that was just through talk therapy and planting suggestions. I could spend the whole time here talking to you about things of this sort that I've seen in my personal experience and that I know to be true. And so when I hear Dr. Xu say that 90% of illness originates in the non-physical sphere, I'm inclined to believe her. I also feel that the mind and body are inseparable. The only way that you can separate them is verbally. They're two poles of the same reality, and anything that happens in one happens in the other. It is a little tricky to talk to patients about the mind-body connection because patients are very sensitive to being accused of making up their illnesses or that doctors aren't taking them seriously. And that's not what you're saying. It's not that the mind causes these things. It's just that there is an interaction there, a connection, and you can take advantage of that connection to put healing suggestions, healing energy that are going to produce changes in the body. But that's part of the art of medicine, is how you explain that to people and how you present it. There's a whole range of mind-body therapies out there: hypnosis, guided imagery, biofeedback, progressive relaxation, or whatever it is that Dr. Xu does. In general, these methods are very time efficient, very cost effective, and they are incredibly underutilized in conventional medicine. I think the reason is simply that because it runs up against this intellectual barrier created by materialist philosophy. Quite some time ago, in the very early days of our program, I was challenged to a public debate by Arnold Relman, who was the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, an arch foe of everything alternative and integrative, who saw me as the devil. And this debate was held in the big auditorium over there in the College of Medicine. We had the CNN health correspondent moderate it. And it was very illuminating. But at one point, I said to Dr. Relman that the area of unconventional medicine that was best researched was mind-body interactions, and that there had been 30 years now of very good studies demonstrating the connection between mind and body, and there were many therapies that came out of that were cost-effective and time-effective, but very underutilized. And I asked him what would he do to increase utilization of them. His response was, there is no evidence for mind-body interactions. And what can you do with a mind of that sort? He also was somebody, his favorite thing to say was, just show me the evidence. That you show me the evidence and blah, blah, blah. So anything you would show him, he would then respond, you call that evidence? That's not evidence. So, this is unfortunately the attitude of many people in those positions. Whenever I sit with a patient, I'm trying to pay attention to all levels. I'm asking myself, since I believe healing is the rule rather than the exception, I'm always asking myself, why is healing not happening here? What's blocking it? What can I do from outside that might facilitate that? And I'm particularly interested in trying to sense, I'm certainly not the skill level of Dr. Xu, but what might be the non-physical obstacles? So as I said, that was the second broad principle of integrative medicine, that we treat whole persons, meaning mind, body, spirit, not just the physical body. The third principle of integrative medicine is that we pay great attention to lifestyle. There is now a whole new field that has grown up called lifestyle medicine. There's a Society of Lifestyle Medicine. I think it's great, and that really is a part of integrative medicine, and we're very comfortable with interacting with that group. But I think, one of the really discouraging problems in healthcare in this country today is that we really put so little effort into preventing disease and promoting health. And mostly what we're doing is trying to manage disease. And unfortunately, most of the diseases that we're trying to manage are lifestyle-related diseases, which if people made better decisions early in life about how to eat, how to exercise, how to handle stress, we wouldn't have them. And the methods of conventional medicine are not very good at managing these conditions. Obesity, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, all of that. And I think that's one of the reasons why our healthcare system is on the verge of collapse today. So even if doctors were trained in how to inquire about and assess the lifestyle of patients, most of them don't have time to do that today. There's not enough time allowed in doctor-patient interactions. So that has to change, and that's something that we very much work for in integrative medicine. The fourth principle of integrative medicine is that we really honor the patient-practitioner relationship. And I'll just say a few words about this. Throughout history, and I think in all cultures, the doctor-patient relationship has been seen as special and maybe even sacred. There is something, I'm tempted to say, magical that can happen when a medically trained person sits with a patient and simply allows that person to tell their story. That alone can often initiate a healing response, before anything is done, any kind of intervention is done. And it is very sad that in this era of for-profit medicine, that the time allotted for doctor-patient interactions has shrunk to almost nothing. And much of that time, the doctor is focused on the computer and not even looking at the patient. And this is also the disappearance of that relationship in our era is also a reason for the growing dissatisfaction of practitioners, because that interaction over the years has been the source of really great satisfaction to people who practice medicine, and it just doesn't exist anymore. That has to change. The final principle, the fifth principle of integrative medicine, is that we're willing to use all methods available to treat disease and promote health, no matter where they come from, as long as they don't cause harm and show reasonable evidence of efficacy. Our movement is often very sharply criticized by the evidence-based medicine movement out there. I have to say that in its extreme forms, I see evidence-based medicine as exactly analogous to religious fundamentalism. It's scientific fundamentalism. You can, in many institutions now, you are not allowed to give a lecture unless you submit your remarks in advance to the evidence-based medicine committee with references that have appeared in journals approved by that committee. That's thought policing, and I find it really repulsive, and that's something that we work against. So what I teach to our fellows and other people we train is that I think we should get in the habit of using a sliding scale of evidence that works like this. The greater the potential of a treatment to cause harm, the stricter the standards of evidence it should be held to for efficacy. As an example, I commonly teach patients how to breathe. And this is something that I've been doing for many, many years. And I have found simple breathing techniques to be remarkably effective in changing physiology and managing many common conditions. I'm not bothered by the fact that there has been so little published research on the medical potential of breathing. It just hasn't been taken seriously. I'm not bothered by that because I know from my own experience how effective these methods can be, and the potential for harm is negligible. So those are the broad defining principles of integrative medicine. But the one that I wanted to focus on tonight was the fact that we are more than physical bodies. Dr. Xu was a very dramatic example of a practitioner who works from that perspective. But this is something that we very much are trying to change. And it runs up, this is a paradigm challenging activity that we're doing, which really threatens hardcore materialists. And I think we have to be very honest about that. It makes people very uncomfortable who are committed to that way of seeing things. And I don't think there's any way of there's really no way of changing people's minds about that unless they have had personal experiences, such as I did with that, hot tub folliculitis, where you know from your own experience how powerful, those interactions can be. So I really don't try to argue with people about that. And, one area in which this comes out very clearly is in the debate that goes on about the nature of consciousness. My first book, The Natural Mind, which was published in 1972, was about altered states of consciousness. And I think consciousness is really the greatest puzzle and problem that we have in trying to understand ourselves and understand humanity. I mean, what is consciousness? One very powerful view that has been dominant in materialistic science is that consciousness arises from the electrical activity or chemical activity of the brain, and that it ends when the brain dies. And that is the scientific view. And until recently, I would say that was the only view that was really out there. But there's another view that always has appealed to me very much, which is that consciousness, that the brain is kind of a receiver for consciousness, that consciousness precedes matter, and maybe consciousness organizes matter into more and more complex forms to understand itself. There's a name for that philosophy. It's called panpsychism, meaning that consciousness pervades everything. And that has been anathema to materialistic scientists. People see that as a view akin to believing in witchcraft. But suddenly, I'm very gratified to see that panpsychism has become respectable. And there are a lot of very serious academics and people studying and looking at this perspective. I don't think you can prove one or the other. I think this is a matter of what you believe. Personally, I find it much more interesting to take that view. I think the world, the universe, our experience becomes much more interesting if you see consciousness as primary. And that has a lot of implications for what altered states of consciousness are, what might happen to us after death. You can all figure that out for themselves. But to me, that makes much more sense. I'm amused to see that scientists are now just beginning and sometimes grudgingly admitting that other forms of life are conscious. Recently there was a lot of news articles saying that scientists have agreed now that dogs are sentient. And there are a number of universities have now centers for the studies of the canine mind. This is very recent, very new. Anybody who lives with a dog knows that dogs are sentient, but it's not just dogs. I would say that I think, in some of the altered states that I've experienced, up canyons here in Arizona, I've experienced rocks as being sentient. That there's some kind of universal, pervasive, self-aware energy in everything, that flows through me as well as everything out there. Anyway, I find that a much more interesting way to think, and I try to develop my medical ideas and practice from that perspective. So pay attention to the growth of panpsychism. I think it is a very refreshing development out there. I very much look forward to seeing what the Health and Humanities Hub can do. I think from what Dean Duran has told me, the University of Arizona is really in the lead in this development. This is a really unique thing. And while other colleges of humanities may have some collaborations with colleges of medicine, usually these are located in the health sciences area and not in the humanities college. So I think the fact that this is really an equal interaction and a collaborative one is very exciting. And I really look forward to seeing where we can go with it. So I'm going to stop there, and I would love to have some dialogue with you with Dr. Wu. Thanks.
Hello? Okay, that's great. Yeah, thank you, Andy, very much for the great talk. I think everyone here will agree with me. Andy is such a great speaker, right? So eloquent, yeah. So easy to understand. Everything flows so naturally. Yeah. So he embodies also the integration of body, mind, and spirit. So I'm very grateful to Andy and also to our collaborations, which already started. And you mentioned already Dr. Xu. We invited her and her partner here just a couple of weeks ago. And that seems to be a very promising collaboration. And also, we just recently received donation to translate the book. So that's completely out of our mind, unexpected. After our lecture, after Dr. Xu's lecture, immediately people want to see the books coming out. So that shows, regardless of the evidence, right? Don't talk about evidence. We have a great support from our audience, from the popular, people from everywhere. Because today we have a limited time. I think we probably only have 15, 20 minutes, so we probably can only ask 4 or 5 questions.
Sure.
And I think maybe we can just trace your career, right, from the past to the present and to the future. And think about many years ago, it's 1968, you graduated from Harvard with a degree from medical school. So that's amazing because you were a product of the traditional medical system, but you seems to be an outlier. So you have different ideas. Where those ideas came from?
Well, I was weird long before I went to medical school. I was up when I was writing books and had to do book tours and was on national television. I was always asked, at what point in your career did you convert to this way of thinking? I never converted. I came into the world this way. I had a long-standing love of plants, which is something I got from my mother that she got from her mother, and that led me eventually to be a botany major at Harvard, which is a very unusual thing to do. There were very few people who went into medicine who had studied botany. But that really started my career just in medicinal plants and trying to understand how complex natural products differ from isolated chemicals, which is a great campaign of mine to change the way we deal with drugs. As long as I can remember, I was interested in the mind, consciousness, what that was. I tried to study that when I was an undergraduate at Harvard. Very frustrated. I tried to major in psychology, which at Harvard was under B.F. Skinner, and it was all the behaviorists who were running rats through mazes, and they were trying to eliminate consciousness from, an understanding of animal behavior. So that didn't work. And one of my early experiences, you'll appreciate this, I can remember lying in bed, I was very young, and playing with my body and finding that if I pinched someplace here, I'd feel a sensation, down there. And so when I began learning about acupuncture and, influencing things at a distance, that made perfect sense to me. In medical school, I found, there was so much that I wanted to know that I wasn't taught. I was very discouraged that the people who taught me pharmacology had no knowledge of the natural sources from which the drugs came that they were teaching about. There was nothing at all about mind-body interactions. And then I did a year of internship in San Francisco, and at the end of that, I knew I didn't want to practice the kind of medicine that I'd been taught because I saw it do too much harm. And also, I'd learned nothing about how to keep people well. It seems to me that the main job of doctors should be to teach people how to live so you don't get sick. The word doctor comes from the Latin word for teacher. And I had learned nothing about that. I learned nothing about health, about healing. So I dropped out of medicine to the horror of my parents and made my living for a number of years as a writer, as a freelance writer. I found ways to travel around the world and visit healers and practitioners of all sorts. And, I saw a lot of crazy stuff. I saw a lot of ideas and practices that were in conflict to what I knew to be true scientifically. But out of all that, I began to put together my own way of thinking about medicine and health. And then my car broke down here in Tucson in 1973, and it took 6 weeks to get fixed, and I never left. I would never have imagined that I would be living in Tucson, Arizona, but it's turned out to be a very good place for me. And I don't think what I've been able to do at the University of Arizona could have really been done anywhere else, certainly not on either coast, where the medical institutions are much more conservative and closed to new ideas. So I had never really seen myself practicing medicine, but patients began showing up at my doorstep. It was a very difficult doorstep to reach up at the mouth of Esperero Canyon, one of the worst roads I've ever been on. Nonetheless, people came. They had read something I'd written or heard, and they wanted to see me. And I was reluctant to practice because I didn't know what I was good at. And I gradually found that I was good at two things. One is diagnosis, which I do mostly by listening to people. And I had heard and read over the years that if you ask the right questions, patients will make the diagnosis for you in their own words. I have absolutely found that to be true, but that assumes that you know how to ask questions, that you know how to listen, and you have time to do that, which few doctors do. The other thing that I found I was good at was being what I call a therapeutic marriage broker. I can arrange happy alliances between patients and practitioners, whether that's within conventional medicine or outside of it. And I found that many people wanted that kind of advice. So I called what I did first natural and preventive medicine, and then I gradually came to use the term integrative medicine. And in the early years, I'd say through the 1980s, I had a larger and larger following in the general public, but none of my medical colleagues paid any attention to me. In the 70s, there was a holistic health movement that started around the country. We had a Southern Arizona Holistic Health Society. The members were nurses, psychologists, social workers, not a single physician came to those meetings. And that didn't change until the early 1990s. That's when a new, very friendly dean came to the College of Medicine, Jim Dolan, who really gave me the green light to start what was then the program in integrative medicine. And when I look back on it, that was the time when the economics of healthcare began to go south. And the conclusion that I draw is that no amount of intellectual argument moves anything. And it's only when the pocketbooks of institutions get squeezed that they begin to open to new ideas and pay attention to what consumers want. Anyway, since then, there has been a steady growing openness to what we do. And the opening of that new building, I think, is a fabulous milestone. We are the first academic integrative medicine center to open in the heart of the medical complex of a major university. So that's a very good thing. So in a nutshell, that was the course of my career.
That's a great overview, right? So suddenly we have been brought back to the 60s and all the way coming to right now. And going back to the 60s, that's really a very interesting time in U.S. history.
Absolutely.
The Vietnam War and the influx of immigration from Asia, and also the ideas, Eastern thought.
Let me say something about that, Jiang. I began reading about traditional Chinese medicine probably in the 1970s. It was unknown here. When I was in medical school, acupuncture was put in the same category as sticking pins into voodoo dolls. When I began reading about Asian medical philosophy, a number of things in it really struck me and made great sense. One is the emphasis on prevention. There's many words written about how it is infinitely easier to prevent disease or correct it in its earliest stages. Traditional Chinese medicine says there are two broad kinds of disease, visible disease and invisible disease. And they say all visible disease is preceded by invisible disease, by which they mean a disturbance in the energy circulation of the body, that may be correctable by acupuncture and other means. And they say if invisible disease is not detected and treated, it eventually crystallizes in the body as visible disease, at which point it's much harder to treat. I mean, that makes a great deal of sense to me. In China, autopsies were not done. It was unthinkable to cut into a dead human body. So Chinese medicine developed without a detailed knowledge of the internal anatomy of the body. And instead, it developed a system of looking at spheres of function of the body. One of the spheres of function that they identified long ago was a defensive sphere of function. And they explored the natural world to find ways of stimulating or enhancing that function. A lot of the mushrooms that I became very interested in from long ago are in that category of natural products that strengthen the body's defensive function. Very interesting contrast with what was happening in Western medicine. When I was in medical school, first of all, when I was growing up, it was impossible to get to adolescence with your tonsils and adenoids because they were defined as useless organs, vestigial organs, which somehow gave doctors license to take them out. Same with the appendix. The tonsils are very important parts of the immune system that defend the body against infection coming in by that route. The appendix is a part of the immune system that's there at the other end of the digestive tract. There were many patients, this was in the 1940s, 1950s, who had abdominal surgery, things like hysterectomies, gallbladder removal, who did not find out until they got their hospital bill that their appendix had been taken out as a preventive measure because it was a useless organ. The worst of these things, which people should not be allowed to forget, was what we did to the thymus gland. The thymus behind the breastbone is a very key component of the immune system. It's where white blood cells, lymphocytes, go to be trained to how to recognize antigens. It's very active in childhood and adolescence, and sometime in adolescence it begins to not do that so much and it shrinks. That's called the involution of the thymus. Somehow that was interpreted as proving that the thymus had no function, that it was a vestigial organ. And in the 1950s, doctors, and this is doctors at leading academic medical centers, invented a disease that every child had called thymic hypertrophy, meaning the thymus is too large, treatable by bombarding it with x-rays. Because the thymus has a lot of rapidly dividing cells, it's very sensitive to radiation. If you shoot x-rays at it, it shrinks up immediately. So a lot of kids, and these were from middle class, upper class families in big cities, went into medical centers to have this course of thymus irradiation. And the way I found out about this is I had a good friend from college who was a lawyer. He was then clerking for a Supreme Court judge. He got a letter out of the blue from Michael Reese Hospital in Chicago, where he'd grown up. It said, according to our records, so many years ago, you were brought into our medical center for a course of thymus irradiation, and we're now finding that many people who had this treatment are developing thyroid cancer 20 years later, and they urged them to come in for a checkup. I mean, how would you feel if you got a letter of that sort? I think that contrast between Eastern and Western medicine, was very revealing. I mean, as I said, the Chinese didn't understand the organs, but they knew there was a defensive sphere of function, and they explored ways of protecting and enhancing it. And while we were destroying or removing, these key components of our defensive system. So, I was really motivated to learn more about the Eastern way of thinking about the body and ways of dealing it, and I've tried to incorporate, a lot of that into the way I practice medicine and the way I teach integrative medicine.
Thank you very much for mentioning Chinese medicine. And we all know Chinese medicine is not just medicine, but a very sophisticated philosophical system, right? So there are lots of emphasis on the integration and interaction. So, and in your talk, I think you also illustrated these central ideas from Eastern philosophy and ideas. The 4 principles of integrative medicine, I think is well articulated. I think it speaks very well to humanists, right? So us who study humanities. And also one of them, second, I think you emphasize the role of mind and consciousness.
Yep.
So that's really important in Eastern philosophy, in particular Buddhist philosophy. But I noticed in your book, in the beginning, you emphasize the natural process of healing. So when you start to realize the role of mind, it's just a recent realization, or it's all the way in the beginning, mind
No, I
has
think it
played
goes
such
back as far as I can remember. As I said, this is why I wanted to find out how to study that in universities, and I was very frustrated that I couldn't. Another principle of Chinese medicine I've read, I don't think this is true today, but it was true historically, that Chinese doctors were paid as long as people were well. and that if you got sick, you stopped paying them, and then they had to, so there was a real emphasis there on wellness and maintaining that.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason why I ask the mind, because back in April, when the new building was open to the public, we had the opening ceremony. You invite Jiang Kabat-Zinn, right? So to talk about the mind, right here, actually, because the second day, that's the Integrative Medicine Summit. So I was there among the audience and listened to his keynote speech. It's full of reference to Buddhism. And he was influenced very much by Nyanapanika's heart of the Buddhist meditation, the pure attention. And one thing he emphasized strikes me is that the traditional education, so we were receiving here, is very much influenced by the Enlightenment movement, right? So we emphasize reason and rationality and completely leave out consciousness, awareness, feeling, all this negative, supposed to be negative kind of
Let me
aspect.
ask you if I'm right about this. I think that I know in Japanese, the word kokoro means
mind.
both mind and heart.
Yes.
And I think that's true in Chinese as well, isn't it?
Same character.
Yeah, so that's a different conception where we see mind and heart, thought and emotion as being separate rather than one thing.
Yeah. So my understanding is that in the Eastern thought, both Chinese, Japanese emphasize the central role of the mind. It's not relegated to the marginal role.
Right.
So it's subjected to your physical body. So your physical body materialism controls your consciousness. It's rather the vice versa. Yeah. So that's the process. Yeah. And so that's my understanding of the integrative medicine's mind is very important. So now let's go back to the present, right? So right now we're here having the great building, and also we have a new area, space for Health Humanity Hub. And we all anticipate there are going to be lots of innovative research, collaboration out of this new building. So can you share with us any ideas for
Well, first of all, let me
advance
say, when you introduced me, you said I was the founder and director of the center. I'm the founder. I'm no longer the director. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Stephen Dahmer, who is the new director of our center, and he's working very closely with you. Well, the building has been a long dream of mine. We, for many years, had a little house, emphasis on little, at the corner of Mountain and Maple. We was really crammed full. It was really embarrassing. We had people from all over the world come to visit us. I remember a delegation from Thailand coming, and they said, "This is the Center for Integrative Medicine." It was really embarrassing. And, I always dreamed that one day we would have, an actual center. I never imagined it would be as wonderful as it is. And that's a tribute to Esther Sternberg and the architects who worked on it. It's a really wonderful space, and I hope all of you will get to visit it. And we look forward to doing many great things there.
Yes. Yes.
Also, let me just say that our main emphasis has been on education, although Dr. Dahmer has been working very hard to start a bricks and mortar clinic here in Tucson, which is finally happening despite banners, every effort to thwart it, but it will happen. But our main effort has been education, and we've been incredibly successful at that. Our 2-year fellowship, we've now graduated almost 3,000 physicians and allied health professionals from that. They're in practice, and they're all specialties, all ages. They're in practice in all states and in many other countries as well. And in addition to that, we have trainings for medical students, residents. We have a condensed curriculum that's now in over 100 residency programs in the U.S. and Canada, in Taiwan also. I think we will continue to expand. And the integrative medicine and residency program, my goal is to see that become a part of residency training in every field, so that one day, whether you go to a gastroenterologist or a psychiatrist or a dermatologist, that practitioner will have had basic instruction in nutrition, in mind-body interactions, and the positive and the pluses and minuses of various alternative approaches. And I think that's a very realistic goal.
Yeah. In College of Humanities, we also emphasize education, right? We have lots of educational programs, and students are at the center of our activities. Research, curriculums, they all centered around the students. And, but however, we also noticed so far the education is very much also evidence-based, right? We teach too much how use reason, rationality to collect the evidence, but we ignore people's experience.
Yep.
Right? So when we talk about lots of the principles here for integrated medicine is based on people's experience, actual experience in daily life. And recently I also attended a 10-day retreat in Diamond Mountain, just not far away from Tucson in Bowie. So that gave me lots of inspiration because it's you basically live solitude in the meditation cottage for 10 days. And we didn't teach students, right? So in addition to use your analytical ability, and there's also human capacities not being fully developed as well. So I hope this collaboration, we can open new doors for different kind of a model of education for higher education.
I'm a great believer in the value of intuition.
Yeah.
I think conventional education discourages people from using intuition. You know, everybody has intuition, but many people don't pay attention to it, don't test it out. I think all the best diagnosticians that I've met have been highly intuitive, whether or not they know that or admit it to themselves. And then you can use objective data to confirm or reject, you know, ideas, hunches that you get from using your intuition. So there are various ways of knowing.
Yeah, and meditation is a great way,
Yep.
right? So to enhance your intuition. So we come to the last question. So I have a private question. So I've interviewed many scholars, intellectuals, because I'm writing a book, How Buddhism Changed World Civilizations, right? I still don't know how to write it. So I ask people, basically. People give me different responses, different answers. So now if I ask you this question, how Buddhism changed world civilization, so what would you say?
That's a hard one. You want to know about how to write or how Buddhism has changed civilization?
Yeah, just out of your mind. I mean, just think.
I had somebody gave me once a book of writers' quotations, and one that I remember from it was that writing is easy. You just put paper in the typewriter that your typewriters and sit down and wait until drops of blood appear on your forehead.
Yeah. So not just for writing techniques, but for the real questions. So your interaction with Buddhism, with different kinds of Eastern thought, what kind of aspect?
Well, my first interaction with Buddhism was with Zen. And my first meditation practice really came from reading about Zen and practicing that. And then I spent a lot of time in Japan, made many visits to Japan, and you know, was very influenced by what I saw of Buddhist aesthetics there and Buddhist practice. One image that I have in my mind, I was in China, I think it was in Shanghai. This was in the 1980s when it was still, China was very different. But there was one Buddhist temple that was functioning in Shanghai. And I went there, it was a big courtyard, and there was a bell was rung and a line of monks came out in single file, looking very grim. I mean, they were sort of looking down, and they just looked very grim. And then at the very end was a big, jolly, fat guy in fancy robes who was just laughing and caught my eye and winked, and you know, I loved that. I mean, he was the senior abbot, and he was on to a good thing.
By the way, what's your impression of Taiwan Buddhism? Because recently we visited Taiwan.
Well, it was very, you know, the university that we're at, people were very serious and solicitous and friendly and welcoming. I mean, it was great. I think Buddhist hospitality was terrific. So, you know, I'll tell you one thing I wonder about. You know, of all the world's religions, I mean, I personally am not that interested in Buddhism as a religion, but as a philosophy, it has enormous appeal to me. And he was clearly one of the most remarkable humans that ever lived. A lot of the ritual that has grown up around Buddhism, I don't know, that I don't relate to that so much. And I also wonder, why are there so many sects of Buddhism? I mean, it has really fragmented it. I try to make sense of them. I can't understand all of them. Well, I'd like to know what your thought is about that.
This will require another lecture, right? And we already started explore opportunities for collaboration, so we can, study and build a research project based on this, right?
Buddhism is one of the only religions that did not produce a war.
Okay,
when the Buddha died, no war followed in his wake. And the ruler of India at the same time of the Buddha, Ashoka, renounced war as an instrument of public policy and created a great era of peace. So that speaks a lot to the power of that philosophy.
So this may be the way Buddhism changed world civilization,
Yep.
right? Non-violence, peaceful, right? Okay, thank you very much, Andy. Right, so this is a great talk. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking again Dr. Wu and Dr. Weil. Thank you so much. There will be a book signing right after that, but before we go there, I just wanted to take this opportunity, since we have mentioned several times the new space we have in the Health Humanities Hub. I wanted to introduce and welcome the coordinator of the Health Humanities Hub, Christine Oekenga, who is with us today as well. So if you are interested in some collaboration, make sure you get in touch with her and with Dr. Damer, who was introduced earlier for the Center for Integrative Medicine as well. I also want to thank all of our friends, all of you in the College of Humanities. We have this is the first day for the festival. We have many other events coming up this month, so make sure you check out the website. It's humanitiesfestival.arizona.edu, I think. Do I have that right? Okay, cool. And you can see all of the future presentations that are open to the public as well this month. All right. Yes, thank you so much.
I don't think you need to go to the website, because I can make an announcement here for next event, right? So we hope to see you. Our next Tucson Humanities Festival event going to be October 17th. A poetry reading with a Pulitzer Prize winner, Brandon Som. Right, so please join us. And following the poetry reading, we will have our faculty salon, Humanity Equals Health, on October 29th. So this is another event on October 29th, 5:30 p.m. at the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine. So if you haven't been to the new building, this is a great chance to visit. And let me see. And also that event is going to celebrate the opening of the Health Humanity Hub, right? So Christine's here, so she will lead the tour. Culture Humanity faculty members will talk about their exciting research and teaching that explores where medicine and the humanities overlap. Meet the scholars who are leading the nation in innovative humanity teaching and research with a tea service, right? So if you love tea, so please come. Provided by 7 Cups and a light reception to follow. And if you will be having Dr. Andrew Weil signing the book, right? So we have a book signing event. So he will be over there at that table. So you can line up along the ramp and coming to the table to get your book signed. And in addition to that, we also have a drawing of $25 Bookman gift card. So one of you going to be very lucky to have that. So only one, right? Okay. So let me go all the way down to the bottom. How about this one?
Perfect. Dr. David Dupree, did I say that right? Yeah. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, congratulations, David. I think that's all, right? So anything else? Oh, thank you, Dr. Andrew Weil, once again. Thank you, A.P. Duran. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so
That
much.
was great. Okay, good. Yeah.
The microphone is still on.
Oh, good.
Yes.